I don't predict wins because I'm superstitious, but I predict we'll do very well. We're going to come out of Iowa, and several more are going to come out of Iowa. We then have 2 primaries and 1 more caucus. I think at the end of that time, you're going to have a clear idea of who's where and how, and I feel very good about where I am.
About how he's feeling on today's caucuses. Joining us now, educator and author and former Second Lady of the United States of America, Dr. Jill Biden. Also with us for the conversation, senior advisor at MoveOn.org and an MSNBC contributor, Karine Jean-Pierre joins us here at Java Joe's.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Jill Biden, I've been watching you all over the campaign trail on Instagram. You've been just kind of not leaving everything on the table.
Everywhere.
How are things feeling for tonight?
Great. They're feeling great. I'm excited. I feel, strong. I think we're going to do this.
And where do you think that Joe will have the biggest strength here in Iowa? What are the voters that you're seeing really connect with him? He's great with people.
He is.
But the field is it's exciting. It's kind of hard to even tell who might come out on top here. People are talking Bernie, Bernie, Bernie.
Well, they can keep talking Bernie, but it's going to be Joe. So, so it feels good. And I think, I've been traveling all over this, mostly rural Iowa, and I think really what Iowans are, you can ask them what they're looking for is character. And Joe shows that strength of character. He connects with the voters. He has empathy. He understands their problems. And I think that's what they're looking for.
Talk about what it's been like for your family to have the President of the United States calling world leaders, asking them to dig up dirt on
Disgraceful.
Your husband and your son, and that Republicans actually, I'll just say it. I saw yesterday, and I was shocked that she was still saying it. Joni Ernst saying in an interview that Joe Biden as president could be impeached because he stopped an investigation into Hunter Biden and Burisma when she knows that is a lie. She knows that one of the reasons the prosecutor was fired was because he was not investigating Burisma.
What is wrong with Senator Ernst, really? What is wrong with her?
Listen, frankly, I was a little shocked that she said something so massively irresponsible.
Mean-spirited.
She and I don't agree on much, but for her to go there and just lie to the people of Iowa like that.
Well, that's the thing is, it was a lie.
It's a
lie. And she knows it's a lie, but what has it been like your family,
lies.
like your family being the focus here and in Ukraine and even in China?
Well, what does that tell you? That Donald Trump is afraid of going up against Joe Biden.
No.
That's the bottom line.
That's the bottom line.
It's when you listen to these campaign speeches, Dr. Biden, from all the candidates, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Andrew Yang in some ways as well, talking about this sort of progressive revolution, and that seems to be where the energy is among young people. We've come to an interesting place in the Democratic Party when Barack Obama's vice president is considered too centrist and too moderate. But what does Joe Biden, what does your husband say to those progressives who may still be looking around for who they want to vote for, but think, well, he's not left enough for us?
But he isn't left. He is a moderate, and I think that's what most Americans want, is a moderate. That he doesn't have these far out ideas that you can't pay for, and oh yes, it'll be $1 trillion and we'll figure it out later. No, he's practical, he's pragmatic, he knows how he's going to pay for things, and I think that's what Americans are looking for.
So do you think Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are selling a fantasy to voters with some of their programs and their ideas?
Well, I think they're a little too far out there. If they could tell us how they're going to pay for things, maybe that might be reasonable, but that's why I'm supporting Joe Biden.
So, Dr. Biden, if you had an undecided caucus goer in front of you right now, which, if you look at polling, which you may, and if you look at the polling, that number is pretty high. What would you tell them, and for them to support your husband?
I would say this is a referendum on character, and Joe can show how strong he is, what kind of a leader he is. He's ready to go. He has the experience. When he walks into that Oval Office day one, he takes over the job. And I think people, it's really about character.
Claire?
You know,
Thank you.
there were a lot of people that had a lot of angst about the email extravaganza with Hillary, and that she never really confronted it forcefully. I know it's probably hard for my friend and your husband, Joe Biden, to give any credence to what they're trying to do to him in terms of smearing a guy who is as straight as the day is long into some kind of nefarious character. It's just outrageous to those of us who know him. But what are the internal discussions about when, I mean, and really, if you think about it, I mean, this is a president whose all of his children are grifting off the White House.
Yes.
You know, they're all making money off being president, right? Yes. So not somebody on a board, but they're actually making money off being president. So what is the decision about not confronting this more forcefully and really taking it on with a big speech, or trying to put it to bed so that it doesn't linger out there?
Well, you know, the voters will decide. I mean, they're going to be the ones making the decision. They know who Donald Trump is, and they know it's disgraceful what he's done. It's a distraction. And obviously, Donald Trump does not want to run against my husband.
Well, there you go. So before you go, many months ago in Philadelphia, I was interviewing you on your book, and you talked a lot about being a community college professor and how, you did it during the 8 years of Joe's vice presidency. Much of the time, with a lot of the kids and students not even knowing that you were the second lady. So you said day one, Joe will be ready. Day one, will you work still if he's in the White House?
I would love to work. I would love to work. If I could figure out how to do it, I would love to be in the classroom. I know I couldn't do it full time, but just if I could teach one course, you know, as you know, it is my passion.
It's your happy place.
Yes, it's my happy place.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.